Now to this story. It's been a year since dedicated corruption-busting civil servant Babita Deokaran was gunned down as she was leaving home. At the time, she'd been probing spending at Tembisa Hospital. Well, yesterday, the Gauteng Premier confirmed an independent probe into her murder. But this comes on the back of an investigation by media house News 24. They went through thousands of emails and text messages to understand exactly what Deokaran was working on and how concerned she was for her safety just before she was murdered. I'm joined now by investigative journalist at News 24, Wicks. Jeff, thanks so much for coming in. You know, it's just such an awful story. We heard news from the Premier yesterday that they're going to be appointing an independent forensic investigator. Now, do you believe that this action was actually only prompted after your articles, which really give us a deep dive into exactly what Babita Deokaran was working on?
Well, I think, Sally, the timing on this is inescapable. The reality is Babita Deokaran blew the whistle on the 4th of August 2021. That is the day that she sent a report on this raft of payments out of Tembisa Hospital to her bosses at the Gauteng Health Department. And now, 3 weeks since we've started publishing, the Premier has announced some sort of action by way of an independent forensic investigator.
Talk to me about there have been suspects arrested, but those might only be the triggermen, am I right?
Well, if the state's case proves true, then yes, they're accused of being the ones who actually facilitated the execution of Babita when she was driving home after dropping her daughter off at school. They face charges relating to her murder, and they've been indicted in the High Court. The Hawks do tell us that the investigation remains open. However, the timing must be considered once more, and it's been a year, and we've seen no further arrests by way of the person who is thought to have ordered this hit.
Yeah, look, it's good to see action, at least. Talk to me about your investigation. As you say, the Hawks are also looking at it, but you seem to have come across a lot of information. Are you able to tell us how you were able to access information, what the information is, and in a nutshell, what you found out?
Well, absolutely. So we've been at this for a good couple of months. Myself, along with the team at News 24, have been working through this trove of documents, and that's the basis of our investigation, are these internal Gauteng Department of Health emails that have now cast light on a scandal which would have otherwise gone unnoticed. What's key in those emails is it plots out a very important timeline. It tells us that Babita Deokaran, little more than a month before she was killed, first stumbled across this massive surge in payments out of Tembisa Hospital. And when I say surge, I mean hundreds of millions of rands, and outstripped much larger facilities in the province. When she looked at where this money was going, and I talk about the companies who are the recipients of these contracts, she found that very few had public presences, and some had very obscure names. And then what also raised the alarm, and we've seen it from the correspondence, is that the amount of the payments is crucial. All are between 400 and 500,000 rand, and that's important because that allows procurement to take place at a hospital level. Anything above that threshold requires a much more rigorous procurement process, and one that's public. But the way in which these payments surged out of that hospital and their amounts was what set her on the trail. And what we've done now is we've gone through these emails and we continue to process them, and we're trying to finish what she started. We're connecting the dots from 217 companies that she flagged doing business with the hospital, and that is something that until today has never been investigated.
So you've got these emails. I presume you've been able to verify them as authentic. Have you been able to follow the money?
Well, that's what we're doing, Sally. So over the past 2 weeks, we've exposed 6 individuals who together control 30 companies who are responsible, for 90 million rand in transactions out of the hospital in the space of 6 weeks. That is the trail that we're on at the moment. We're trying to follow the money.
90 million rand in 6 weeks?
Yes. The most recent story we published centered on a married couple, a woman who worked as a part-time call center agent and her husband who was a sound engineer. And through their 10 entities, they billed nearly 30 million rand in under a month.
I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. It's a complete plunder of this hospital when we know the dire state that our hospitals in this province are in. Is there any way, from what you're seeing, that top officials either at Tembisa Hospital or perhaps even further up the food chain in the Gauteng Department of Health wouldn't have known about this?
Well, we can say conclusively that they all knew about it because Babita Deokaran filed a report on these transactions. She flagged these individual companies and she called for a detailed investigation. What's happened afterwards is probably the most egregious thing, is that when she died, that investigation, or the thought of it, was cast aside, and what the Gauteng Health Department did instead was undertake a randomized compliance audit where they looked at supply chain management procedures through hospitals all around the province instead of looking at Tembisa. So we don't know exactly how many of those dubious payments that she flagged ended up being scrutinized, but I think it's instructive now that the Premier has decided to launch an independent investigation into what she blew the whistle on just days before she was killed.
And she also flagged that she was worried about her safety. Was anything done to protect her?
Well, very little, if nothing. So we know from her correspondence with the Gauteng Health CFO Lerato Maggio that on the 12th of August, bear in mind she was assassinated on the 23rd, she sent a message that said our lives might be in danger. And that was triggered by the stopping of payments to companies she'd flagged as being potentially fraudulent. And what happened thereafter was Lerato Maggio told her that she had bumped her request for an urgent investigation up the chain to the HOD of the department. We've now learned that that never happened, and that was a lie. And to date, that request for an investigation has been ignored.
Lerato Maggio still in their position?
Lerato Maggio is still occupying the post of CFO, and Dr. Ashley Mtunzi is still the CEO of Tembisa Hospital.
Jack Bloom of the DA is saying that the CEO of Tembisa needs to be suspended immediately. Would you agree?
Well, I do think our point of departure, Sandy, is that this was never investigated, and we don't make any findings of malfeasance other than what we can prove. And what we say is that it's a travesty that it's taken this long to investigate it, but it should be probed to the fullest extent possible by a number of organizations. And there are pitfalls to the Premier's announcement about his independent investigator. That person will not have the power of subpoena. They'll not be able to follow the trail of money to its end destination. What we need is a careful look by the SIU.
Would you hand over all the information you have to authorities?
To be honest, Sally, the SIU has the power of subpoena, and everything we rely upon sits on Gauteng Department of Health Service. And if they are to make good, and if they are to hold people to account, if there are people to be held to account, they will need to preserve their chain of custody, and we will tell them exactly where to look.
19 million rand in 6 weeks plundered from Tembisa Hospital. It's astonishing. And Babita Deokaran, doing her best to fight it all, is no longer with us. Thank you so much. Such an important story, and I really appreciate you coming in to talk to us about it.
Thank you
so much. From News 24, that's investigative journalist Jeff Wicks. Now, still to come on